Thank you for joining us today for this panel session, Competency-Based Learning Set Up to Transcript. My name is Ari Nemser. I will be your moderator today. In our time together, educators will gain insight on best practices and proven strategies of success to kickstart the implementation of competency-based learning at their institution. We will cover the detailed consideration given to the development of a competency-based assessment model for Virtual Learning Academy Charter School, a leading pioneer in competency-based online education. Outcomes and observations from their implementation process will showcase how to simplify processes, overcome barriers, and enable more competency-based providers to scale. Joining us today are members from the Virtual Learning Academy Charter School team, as well as Dr. Jose Sabat, Chief Technology Officer with Maestro SIS by BocaVox. I'd like to commence the session with introductions, starting with Steve Kossakoski, CEO of Virtual Learning Academy Charter School, followed by his team and Dr. Sabat. Steve?
Steve, if you're talking, we're not hearing you.
Thank you. It works better when you unmute yourself. So welcome, everybody. I'm Steve Kossakoski, CEO and co-founder of the Virtual Learning Academy Charter School.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Berger, Director of Student and Instructor Support at the Virtual Learning Academy Charter School.
Hi, everyone. Scott Prescott. I'm Director of Instruction and Technology at the Virtual Learning Academy Charter School.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Reece, and I am the Director of Partnerships and Adult Ed at the Virtual Learning Academy Charter School, which we also call VLAX.
Dr. Sabat? You might be muted.
Okay. I learned with this. Thank you, everyone, for the patience for me to unmute myself. My name is Jose Sabat. Like I said, I am the founder and the CTO of BocaVox, a company that provides the student information system for VLAX in a partnership with VLAX. I'm very happy to be here to discuss about our journey to implement this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to get started with some questions for our panelists. This first question will be for Steve. Steve, could you please share with us how the vision of VLAX came to be and what drove the decision to offer a competency-based program?
Well, the original vision was really one that came forward from our superintendent at the time. I was one of his assistant superintendents, and he just asked me, is it time to look at creating a virtual school? Is the technology matured enough that we could really make a go of this? And it was this was probably 2006, 2007, and I said I thought it was, and so I was given the task of designing VLAX, which I'll forever be thankful for. And we opened in 2008. And one of the most important things or decisions, I think, was that we were going to be competency-based, as was the state of New Hampshire at the time. And that we really wanted to kind of push the boundaries of what it means to be competency-based. What could we do beyond a traditional classroom, beyond a traditional online classroom even? So we've built in a lot of flexibility. We have sought not only to have kids participate in traditional online learning, but also to move them out into the world and to be involved in work-based learning and internships and job shadows and working on projects. Students who come to VLAX can set their own schedule. There's no calendar. They work when it makes sense for them to work. They have the amount of time they need to learn a concept before they are assessed on competency. Sometimes that means that kids really go quickly, and other times it means that they need a little extra time. So really, competencies have allowed us to do that and to make that possible.
Could you share with us some main challenges or considerations you had to, look into, tackle when you were planning for the opening of the program and rolling it out in the first year?
Sure, technology was a piece. At the time, there was really there weren't the platforms that we have today. We started out using an open source LMS, probably many people have heard of, called Moodle. We did a lot of customization. We were very fortunate that at the time, our CTO or CIO at the time was also a full stack developer and did a lot of the initial work for us. And SIS was an issue, and luckily the Florida Virtual School had an SIS that they leased out to us, and that was our very first SIS. Funding, of course, was an issue too. I remember there were nights where I was convinced that we probably wouldn't make it to our first September because I wasn't sure how we were going to meet payroll. But luckily, some local banks helped us out, and the Commissioner of Education helped us out, and we were able to secure enough funding to get started. And we grew from about 400 enrollments to 20 or 30,000 enrollments on a regular basis. Now we work with about 10,000 students, most of whom are in New Hampshire, but we do have out-of-state students as well. So really it was, technology was a challenge. Funding, of course, was a challenge. We were lucky that we attracted a lot of really high quality educators, many who are still with us. And that was one of the most exciting parts, I think, of the opening, was meeting all these new folks.
Thank you. Well, it sounds like you've experienced some very noticeable growth since the opening. Is there anything you could attribute to that growth? Perhaps things that you've done on your side and your team?
Well, I think one of the things we have to acknowledge right away is in New Hampshire, the way we're set up, all of our services are free to New Hampshire residents. So obviously that's a big advantage. Any out-of-state students pay tuition to us, but having the state level funding is a big deal. We're not in competition with local schools. About 72% of our kids are taking 1, 2, or 3 courses or more sometimes, and are also going to school full-time at their regular school. We have a lot of homeschool kids. We have about 800 full-time students. We're able to serve a whole lot of kids. I also think that our philosophy of providing a great deal of flexibility to students, allowing them to work when it makes sense for them in ways that make sense for them. And then also one of our foundational principles is that we build relationships, and our instructors, our employees are fantastic at that, getting to know kids, getting to know the families. I think that's been one of the most important things we ever did, was to really focus on relationships.
Thanks for sharing that. The next question is for Natalie and Julie. What would you say are some of the key differentiators at VLAX compared to, let's say, other more traditional programs?
Well, one of the things that our instructors notice first is that we have rolling admissions. So when we have our instructors that we start training, we have to explain to them how it's very different from when you may be in a classroom and the kids all come on the first day of school. Here, an instructor might be starting a new student on the same exact day that they're completing a student in that same course. So there are certainly some advantages for that for our students who might have they are ready to start a new course partway through the school year, where in another system they might need to wait till that next school year begins. They can start right away with us. So that really does help students who might be ready to accelerate, or students who need competency recovery. So that's an advantage. There are also challenges with that. For example, we have AP courses. AP doesn't change their test date just because we have rolling admissions, right? So we at times have to fit the puzzle pieces together of an asynchronous rolling enrollment course with some deadlines that are imposed by outside structures. And Julie has a couple others she's going to talk about.
I do have a couple of others, and some of these Steve touched upon earlier, but I think what goes hand in hand with the rolling enrollment is also the fact that we are self-paced. So that means that students will demonstrate their mastery of what it is that we are asking them to do before moving on at a point in which they are ready, in which they have actually mastered those competencies and that content and skills. So we remove time as a factor, which is really, provide some powerful opportunities for student learning. So, in a traditional setting, at the end of a quarter or the end of a unit, everybody, the entire class moves on. And the student who mastered the concepts weeks ago has been waiting, and the student who isn't quite ready has to move on, with the entire group. Whereas in our self-paced model, the student moves on when they're ready to. So those students who need more time and more instruction can get it. Another aspect I think that makes us unique are our different learning pathways. Steve mentioned this earlier. We have, traditional online courses, but then we also have project-based learning, and we have a pathway that we call experiences. And in both projects and experiences, we are developing these in-house with our own curriculum design team. And they both have a pretty strong element of career-based learning. So in our project-based learning, there's one competency for every project, and the students take on the role of somebody in a particular career or field. They learn about that career and that career pathway, and then they solve a problem or create a deliverable that someone in that field might encounter while they're also working to master that specific competencies, content, and skills. And then our experiences pathway is a very authentic career-based learning, in that the student creates their learning, how they're gonna learn, how they're going to demonstrate their learning by working with their VLAX instructor and an outside expert who is in the career. And so this is it's very, very customized and individualized for the students, but across the board, it's the same competencies, whether the student is demonstrating it through the traditional course, the projects, or the experiences.
Thank you, Julie. We do have one question. We will have some time at the end for questions, but I believe this is in connection to what you had just shared. It was asked, do you hold live Zoom classes? And if so, what does a typical class time look like?
We do not hold live Zoom classes in the sense that it's a synchronous class. Our teachers will meet one-on-one with students at specific times as the curriculum dictates. They might meet with them we have assessments called a discussion-based assessment that's at the end of every competency. And then instructors will meet with students to provide one-on-one help through office hours or through appointments.
Thank you for that. Our next question is for Scott. Scott, could you tell us a little bit about what is unique and how you handle assessment and what tools you're using to facilitate academic progress tracking?
Sure. I'm going to share my screen just for a minute. I think it'll help with this. So what we do with assessment is, and I'm going to talk about courses and then projects and experiences. In our courses, each unit of study we have a competency for that unit of study. And within each competency, so we're at a competency statement, then in each competency, we usually identify 2 to 4 competency assessments, and these are key assessments. They're assessments that students have to get an 85% on or better on, or they redo them until they do get to that point. One of those is always, as Julie had mentioned before, a discussion-based assessment. So that's an oral assessment that's one-on-one with the teacher. We actually give the prompts to the students ahead of time so that they know what they're going to discuss and be asked about. They involve higher order thinking, so it's not as simple as students just looking up the answer and reading them to the teacher when they meet. And one important thing to note is that we purchase our courses, we don't develop them, so we retrofit these competencies to them. The courses come to us and then we write the competencies to them after that. The reason I bring that up, we retrofit them for that, is when we do projects and experiences, we develop those. So we do it kind of in a planning backwards model, if you will. So when we're doing these for projects and experiences, we define the competencies, which means the competency statements. We do what we call a competency analysis, which is basically breaking it down into the criteria that you need to demonstrate competency. And we create the competency assessments, and we create a competency rubric. So that's what we use for all the assessments in there. We use the competency rubric, which is directly linked back to that competency to measure the student's success. We have a column that says competent, one that says exceeds, and one that's approaching. So we do that. We use the same competency for a course as we do for a project and experience version of it. So the statement holds true across all three if we have that offered in all three. Creating a project, the projects allow students to master and demonstrate competency through a pre-designed project that always has a career focus, so something that somebody would actually do in a career. And the student must meet the competent criteria for what we call the deliverable, which is the final product of that project. In the discussion-based assessment, we use the same rubric for it. And experience is very similar, except we don't have a pre-designed project. They may be working with somebody out in the field. They're interested in finance. Maybe they're working with a financial planner. They're interested in water, and they're working with a water filtration place. And then we look at the competencies they're going to master, and we design the projects based on where they're working. But we still use the same rubric that we use for our projects that cover the same competency, and they have to master and demonstrate the same piece. Those are co-designed with the student and the teacher and the professional that they're working with outside. So the tools that we use, and I'm sorry, that was a real quick overview of all that. But
ask a quick question.
Yeah,
we had
sure.
a question about your projects. The question that came in was, are there lessons or activities before the project to help students develop competency and skills before the project? Would these be from the pre-built purchase curriculum?
There are lessons. They are not from the pre-built curriculum. So what we do is basically take each of the criteria that are in the competency. Maybe we've broken it down into 4 or 5 items that would also be the same items that are in the rows of the rubric. And we have a little lesson on each one of those, which is still a fair amount of independence. We lead them to places that they go and learn about those different. So they walk through those, and there are formative assessments for each one of those as they go along. But really the key assessment is the final project and the discussion-based assessment. So let me just talk a little bit about the tools that we use to track progress. And I broke this up into Canvas tools and Maestro. Canvas our LMS, and Maestro is our SIS. So the Canvas tools, we use their outcomes. Those are our competencies. And then you can define outcome assessments in there that are attached to each of the outcomes. So those are our competency assessments. Those are fully accessible. Students can see them. They can see which assessments are competencies. We actually, in the course, in the offerings, we put a little bullseye next to each assessment that is a competency assessment. So it's really clear to students, this is one of those ones you got to get an 85 on. Canvas also has a built-in progress tracker that we use that just checks off when they've done different assignments. They also, in their progress tracker, you can indicate that a student has to earn a certain level. So on the competency assessments, we set that at 85%. It indicates with a green check if they met it, and if they didn't, there's a little red mark that says you got to redo it, basically. And then we also use a Canvas pace tool, which since we're asynchronous, still means students need to move through the courses, and we do an individual pace plan for each student. So that's how we do things in Canvas. in a nutshell. In Maestro, what this translates to, students can, when they sign up for a course, they can either sign up for the whole course or they can sign up for individual competencies. So they've designed it in such a way that they can go in and pick any of those competencies or outcomes that, in the language of Canvas and Maestro. Maestro recognizes the outcomes and outcome assessments from Canvas. So they bring them over and they recognize what those are. And they have an outcome grade book that shows whether the student met or didn't meet each outcome. And it can break it down by each assessment, and they can see if they did not meet it, which assessment they still didn't earn the 85% or better on. They basically do a calculation of the grade, and if the student earned an 85% on the outcome assessment, then they met it. And if they didn't, then it shows that they didn't meet that. And then the final piece to that is we grant credit based off of outcomes completed, not completing the course. They need to meet each competency, and how we grant credit. If it's a 1 credit course and there are 8 competencies, if they meet 8 out of 8 competencies, they get 1 credit. If they meet 4 out of 8 competencies, they get half a credit, and so forth. So they do it as a fraction. So they've designed it in such a way that it does that. I think that's it. I'll stop sharing. Yeah.
Our next question will be for Dr. Sabat. Dr. Sabat, would you share with us how the conversation began with VLAX and regarding their unique assessment needs and how it progressed into what you developed for them?
Yes, of course. We had discovery meetings, and we tried to understand what were the requirements that VLAX had, specific requirements that will be needed for us to add or to implement or to configure in the product, so they could make the life of the students and the parents easier when they are requesting courses with all those different flavors of pathways. And another concept that VLAX uses is the concept of grouping outcomes in segments. So a student can do a segment 1 or can do a segment 2, and this is a kind of block of competence that they acquire. And in order to do all that, we had to learn a lot about the operation and unique things that they had. Specifically, what they mentioned there about the pathways, that how the student could select easily the pathways to do each outcome. If I can share my screen here, I can show one view of how the student sees and how they select those pathways. Let me see if I share here my screen. Here is an actual say page where the student goes on VLAX portal, and they say, okay, I would like to take biology. And we have some questions here that dynamically VLAX created about COVID, and they tell when they want to start because rolling enrollment. And depending on the course, for this course specific biology 1 is offered by VLAX in 3 pathways, and they explain the pathways here. And the student now, they have the full freedom to select what type of, like Scott mentioned, I would like it to do that segment 1, I want to do those 2 outcomes, and I would like a course, one with experience, one in project. All these selections reflects on a very, say, complex algorithm to define what are the best courses that we have to allocate at that time. Because one thing that VLAX also introduces the concept of each instructor can customize their own courses. So in each instructor, they have allocated capacities and how busy they are. So Maestro tries to use the algorithm to allocate the best at that moment. Teacher is a combination of teachers that are going to be teaching different pathways for the same outcome. So students select one single course can end up with several courses with different teachers because each one is specialized in different pathways. And to learn all of that and to implement in an easy way was a challenge that we had, and I think we implemented nice. Now the student can go and select the. So these are what I'm talking about. Each teacher or each instructor, they will have different flavors of the same course. For instance, biology, to give you an idea, see how many flavors you have the same course. For each instructor, they create their own course that can be used for different pathways, and we have to allocate the teachers for this pathway. So those were a challenge that we had in the beginning. Also, how you define how you create the capability for you to judge if the student had achieved that outcome that they have selected.
Dr. Sabat, if I could ask, and maybe you'll be getting to this, could you talk about how the connection between the Maestro system and Canvas works? And if there's anything you might be able to show with tracking the assessments once they occur?
Yes. Basically, all the setup of the outcomes, the terminology that we use, are done in Canvas by VLAX instructors, basic VLAX instructors. So they set up this whole content and how they would like to present the outcome for the student and how to associate some assignments to cover that specific outcomes they have to achieve. And we import these through an integration with Canvas, and everything that you see in Maestro related with competency is extracted in a daily basis, on a periodic basis from Canvas, and we just show how the students are progress using a grade book that I can show to you here. We have, this is a grade book that's very visual. And like Scott said, we have a color code. If the student has met, basically they have two levels. If the student met or the student not met. If the student received 85% in all the assignments that are related to that outcome, they met. And now they created later when the student receives 100% in all the assessments. So they exceeded that mastery. And that's the way for you to see, they can look here and see what's graded by the colors, and all this is set up by VLAX. The administrator Scott, they go and they do all this setup, the colors and everything. And you can zoom, you can select a specific student and see how they are doing in a specific enrollment. And like Scott said, here are the assignments with little symbol here to indicate this assignment is specific for a provide the capability and the artifacts that's going to comply with this first outcome here on the segment 1. And the student can see the grades they have. You see here, he got a 97, 100, 100, 100. He almost got exceeded, but because he was below 100%, he got a met here. Here, oops. Oh God. Another one. I just click on it. The last one that you see here, this last outcome, the student received 100% in all the assignments, artifacts that complies with this outcome. So he got 100%. So it basically, you can have, this is a tool for them to visualize and for the student to visualize how they are progressing on the mastery of the, in this case, the Biology 1 course.
Dr. Sabat, are instructors inputting any sort of qualitative comments connected to the assignments or the specific outcomes?
Yes, they do that. They can do that either in Canvas, or if they wanted to be more specific, they can use those squares here that are below, beside the graded mat. They can add comments that are going to be added to the transcript.
Thank you. All right, did you have anything else to share, Dr. Sabat, or?
No, that's, I guess, it's a very, a lot of flexibility, but we have to make sample for the students to be able to select, and for the parents also to follow up what the students are doing.
Thank you so much for sharing that. The next question will be for Julie. Could you tell us a little bit about what rolling the program out was like? Everything from your curriculum planning to, obviously you had some pretty comprehensive system tools you had to use here for assessment. And did you have any training for your staff? Just what that looked like.
Sure. I think I'm not going to speak to the curriculum planning because I think that's something that we have that is ongoing and that was happening regardless, regardless of our switching, upgrading our technology. And then with respect to upgrading our technology, it's important, I think, for audience members to understand that we had been using the same systems, the same LMS and the same SIS for 10 years, I think. So it was a really big job to implement this upgrade. We had been, the team had been working with BocaVox for a number of years on all of the requirements. And then in terms of rolling it out, given that we are self-paced, rolling admissions, we never shut down. So this had to happen while everybody was, still learning and teaching and parents monitoring, and then our partner schools also monitoring their students. So it was really quite a complicated undertaking. Recognizing this, we started preparing our faculty and staff months in advance. We try, and not just faculty and staff, parents and partner schools. We did that through providing kind of sneak peeks as what was coming, what some of the new features would be, what some of the things that teachers were used to doing, how they would also still be able to do it in all of the new systems. So that went on for a number of months. And then when we were ready, we started, there was like a huge training effort. And actually Natalie could probably speak with more detail about this, but we had videos, we had live sessions, we had our instructional support team available for drop-in office hours. It was really extensive training on how to use not just, Maestro, but also how to use Canvas, how to use them together. And there was a large team of people involved with training and using a lot of different methodologies.
Thanks for sharing that. If I could go a little further. So personally, I'm actually a former teacher myself, and my experience was always when our school or our district told us there was a new piece of technology used, it was either a very exciting moment or a very scary moment. And, in many instances, we hoped that the technology would make our jobs easier. And for many of us, our initial reaction was, well, here's just one more thing we have to learn to add to our list of tasks. So could you share how it was received by your team and how you pushed it really into a positive change?
Julie, do you want me to hop in?
Sure, if you'd like to.
Okay, sure. We started, as Julie said, early. I think even starting maybe our official transition time was in August of 2021. And starting in about January or February, we started talking openly with our office staff first. We did some readings in some meetings in terms of change management and how change can be viewed and how it can be managed, and talking about people's feelings about the upcoming change. And then we sort of started kind of trickling that out to our instructors as well. Many of them are adjuncts. They're not full-time employees with us, so they don't necessarily come to the same meetings where we could have like a that type of session together, but we did try to share that out. So some of this we wanted to acknowledge was just anytime a change happens, how are you going to feel about it? How are you going to manage your own feelings about that? And I think that there was because we approached it as an exciting change, and Steve did a really good job of explaining why this change was important to us. What were the benefits going to be, and what about our old technology was limiting us in terms of, we have always seen ourselves as an innovative school. And yet there, at some point in time, when technology starts limiting your ability to do new innovative things, you need to look for what's going to help you continue to stay on that cutting edge. So I think our instructors and our office staff were ready and excited when the change was coming. Then I think, like we'd expect, reality hits as well, when you're like, oh, I'm so excited. And then there was a little bit of a perfect storm with the timing of it. We didn't anticipate that there was going to be a Delta variant of COVID, and we were going to get slammed with a bunch of enrollments at the same time as this upgrade was happening for us. So it was a rough fall last year, to be honest, and it wasn't just a technology piece. It's life and the combination of factors. I think the number one thing that, if I were to go through something like this again, I would do. One thing we did was we offered a lot of drop-in hours from our instructional support team, and instructors needed that, because no matter how much pre-work we did, we can show them a million videos ahead of time, even give them all the written pieces of work, but they needed somebody to sit with them when they were in that moment, saying, okay, here's what I think I know how to do. Am I doing it right? So the more just live times that they could, and it's sort of colleague to colleague. It's not, their boss telling them how to do it. It's their colleague and their support system being there to help make sure that they are feeling confident in the new skills that they're learning. So I think for me, that was the most important piece, was that we tried to over support them through it, and I would do that again.
Thank you for sharing that. As we wind down towards the end of this panel session, I'd like to give each of our panelists an opportunity to share with us one piece of advice you have for those of us on the call that are looking at starting a competency-based program or have one that's been implemented already. Just one sort of piece of advice from your experience that our visitors can take with them today. I'd like to start with Dr. Sabat, and then we'll work through the VLAX team and finish off with Steve.
Yes, my advice is try to set up an environment, like a stage environment, where you can, but very realistic, where you can have all the interested parties to work on that environment without the stress, so you can see what are the things that needs to be corrected. Those type of implementation, like Natalie said, is like an art. It requires a lot of moving parts to work very nicely together. And this learning that we can do not in the stress mode is very important for everybody to do. But most of the time we do not have that luxury to have this. But if you can do, my advice is to, we had a lot of stage environment, but when and we also have partners that are willing to go the mile for you and to try to help you as much as possible and be there for you, because it's not finished when you just have opened the operation. It's an ongoing things that you learn and you improve as you go.
Thank you. Let's go to Natalie.
I think my advice is to be sure that you and your team know what your non-negotiables are. What are those things that you absolutely have to have as part of your design and your system? Because there's never going to be the magical perfect fit. There's going to have to be a give and take in the pieces. And so you want to make sure you know exactly and can state really clearly what are the pieces that, of your philosophy that need to come out in whatever technology you're doing.
Thank you. Julie?
Sure. I think a very important piece that I learned from all of this and would want to advise all of you is the importance of communication, the importance of transparency in your communication. Even if you think you're being clear and transparent, maybe even push yourself a little bit beyond that, because maybe you're not quite, maybe it's not quite being received as you expected. And I think also to make sure to keep tying it back to the reason why you're making this change. And I think that was something that I think I have to say, I think we did a pretty good job with that. I mean, I think tying it back to our vision, our philosophy, and that this change wasn't just something we were doing because it seemed like a fun thing to do. We were doing it because we felt that our technology was holding us back from fully realizing our vision of competency-based online learning.
Thank you. Scott?
Sure, thanks. So I think I have more than one piece of advice. I know I do, but the few things that I thought about is one, if you're going to do it, go for it. Don't kind of half do it. I think that's a mistake. And a few other things that I thought about that we've learned is have a clear and consistent way of creating your competencies, a process for doing it. We've spent years doing that and designing that. I really am a big supporter of the competency rubric. I think that really keeps you focused on what the students are supposed to learn. And I think oftentimes our rubrics are project-based rubrics that are based on that given project, and people aren't looking at the overall, what are the students supposed to learn. It's a little bit of creates a little dissonance for some instructors, first of all, but in defining those competency assessments, in allowing students multiple ways to demonstrate the competency, that it's not just, that's one of the reasons you've heard us talk about discussion-based assessments, that we have those because they're an alternative way to written or presentation or whatever. It's a different way for them to do it. So, yep. And I think Steve, we're up to.
Thanks, Scott.
I'd say the advice I have is to embrace ambiguity, build relationships. The reason for saying embrace ambiguity is I think everybody sets out with a vision. Everybody expects everything to go well. You do all the things that everybody has mentioned here, and still there's stuff that's not going to work out. And so you've got to be able to say that's okay. That's part of this process. Perhaps no one else has done this before, and we need to figure this out. And also, building relationships is, as I said, it's the basis of what we do, but you need to have really good relationships with your employees, because if something doesn't go well, you've got to have kind of built up that cache of goodwill, so that you can say, hey, this isn't going as well as we had hoped, we're going to fix it and move forward. And also build relationship with vendors and contractors and others. I mean, we've been working with Jose and his team now for 2.5 years. They're just fantastic people. It's some of the times in our meetings that I really enjoy the most are at the beginning, when we just kind of chatting about what people are doing in their lives and so forth, and getting to know them. And whenever we've needed help, reached out to Jose or his wife Sue, who is the CEO, and said, please help us. They've just stepped up to the plate and worked very hard for us. So I think the relationship piece just goes across the board, for everybody that you kind of come in touch with, and I just think it's very important.
Thank you, Steve. We will take the remaining roughly 10 minutes for questions. We'd love to open it up to anyone that is attending here today. You can drop it in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself and address it towards one of our panelists. We'd love to engage in some conversation. Following our question time, I will put up the slide again with the information for all of our panelists. If you still need to grab any of their emails and would like to contact any of our panelists, to chat with them further about today's discussion. And also, please don't forget to stick around. There's a 1-minute short poll by Aurora about the panel session, and they would love your feedback. So with that said, any questions from attendees? You've mentioned that you work with partner schools. Do you have any students that are, in quotes, just yours?
Yes, we do. I was just typing in the answer. We do. We have, I think it's close to 800 students in grades K through 12 who are, just ours. They are our full-time students. We are their school of record.
Another question, do you purchase your curriculum from just one vendor or do you use several?
Sure, I'll answer that. We the projects and experiences we design in-house, so those are ours. We purchase courses from a variety of vendors. We probably work with about 8 or 9 different vendors. Primarily we work with 2, and then there's some others that are kind of niche providers for things that we want.
Any other questions from our audience? All right, well, last chance. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, with that said, I'd like to request our Jenna at Aurora, would you please share the screen with the contact information for our panelists, just to give attendees a chance to jot any of that information down if they would like it?
I just shared it in the chat for you.
Thank you very much. And please stick around for a 1-minute poll. Looks like we were able to wind down about 10 minutes early. But please stick around for the poll. I believe Aurora will be posting that up on the screen momentarily. And we hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.